Okay, well, did you miss me? I missed you. I don't know. I don't really understand, though, when I've been asking people how things went for the last 2 weeks. They've been saying better than usual. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but whatever. I'm glad you had a good time. I heard you had some crazy guys. You had one guy having everybody take selfies and put them on Facebook, and I didn't know that was going on, and so I just checked my Facebook one day, and I'm like, what? but glad you had a good time with Kurt, and had a guy busting through a door or whatever I hear, and I just appreciate Curtis and Jeremy coming and filling in, and like I've been telling everybody, you've certainly deserved a break from me. But I'm back. Hey, if you your sermon notes are on YouVersion if you have a smart device. And if not, they're in your bulletins, although, I printed extra bulletins last night, and we're still out of bulletins. I think that's a good thing. But your sermon notes are in your bulletins if you have one. And I just wanted to talk today, whenever I go and do something with the state or with the district or something with the Church of God, I want to share with you what's going on. You guys don't get a chance to go to a lot of these kind of things, and I just wanted to share with you what's going on. I went to the men's retreat, and fortunately this year Gary went with me, and we went to Camp Sharon and for the men's retreat. And I told Gary, I said, I always like to share with everybody what's happened, so since you go, you could preach today. But he turned me down on that, so I guess he can help me out. Because the bad thing is, though, I went to the men's retreat, and then I took a week's vacation, so memory's never been a high point of mine anyway. So hopefully I can remember everything that, I can't remember everything that went on, but most of it anyway. But it's a statewide men's retreat. It's called Churchmen, is like the name of the men's group. We met at Camp Sharon, and we doubled the number this year. We doubled the number of men that went from Oak Grove last year. And I hope next year we can double it again. And guys, just think about it. Put it on your calendars, and if you can, get away. And I'd just love to take a group of you up with me to Camp Sharon. One thing that's always interesting whenever I go to something like this, and I know that you have your jobs and things where you go to like seminars and things, and you walk into a room of people, and isn't it interesting? You walk into a room of people that for the most part you don't know them, but before that day's over, or in this case before that weekend's over, there's going to be a few people that you just become closer to. Isn't that weird? I don't know exactly why that is. Similarities in personalities, or I don't know, but it always happens, and it certainly happened this weekend. There was just a few guys that we just came a little closer to, and it's always those people that whenever it's time to leave, you look around and see if you can find them to tell them goodbye, and that always happens, and that's one of the neat things about going to something like this. The retreat started on Friday and went through Sunday. And although some of us went up on Thursday to get in an extra round of golf. Now, since it was for the men's retreat, I counted as ministry, okay? It was ministry. We went up and played. There's always a golf tournament that goes with the men's retreat. So we went up and played the course the day before so that we'd know the course a little better when it come time for the tournament. So Friday morning started with the golf tournament. And after that, we returned to camp, we ate dinner, and then we went to our first session. And a session basically consists of worship and a speaker. And as you see here, this is kind of what the dining hall looks like. And this is the feeding troughs that they had 2 of them there, and we just lined up and just ate like pigs over the weekend. But they fed us very well. Saturday then consisted of eating breakfast. We had a business meeting for the churchmen. Then we had a morning session, and then we ate lunch. And then we had some free time in the afternoon. And then we ate dinner. You notice there's a lot of eating going on during this. And then we had another session that evening. And then Sunday, they fed us breakfast. And then we had a morning session, and then we went home, which is just in time because we were missing our wives terribly by then, and we just had to get home. So that's basically how the retreat went. We had a great crowd. We had over 100 guys there, which last year, in comparison, last year we had around 50. So we had a good number of guys there. Our speaker was Jim Lyon. And he is the national director of the Church of God. He is what I would call a very well-spoken man. I think Gary described him very well after hearing him. He called him a wordsmith. And I think that's a very good description. He has a very large vocabulary, and he knows how to use those words and keep your attention, and just a very good speaker. One of these guys, I seen him speak at General Assembly one time. And he's just one of these guys that can get up there, no notes, never has any notes, just gets up and just starts speaking. And can speak for who knows how long, no notes at all. And to me, he always seemed like one of these guys that you could find on a stage somewhere just reciting Shakespeare. That kind of person. And a very good speaker. I think that Jim Lyon was a great choice to be our national director. He was chosen 3-4 years ago, maybe, something like that. I can't remember exactly when. But I think he was a great choice to be our national director. I think he understands the needs of the Church of God movement. Now, by definition, the Church of God movement is a Reformation movement. We're not a denomination. We are to be a Reformation movement. However, over the years, we become more like an organization than a movement. And a movement's supposed to be something that moves, right? That moves. A movement's something that moves. Or I think a popular word that we could describe it today is that a movement really is supposed to be something that's organic, something that's alive, something that's growing, changing, and adapts as it needs to. But unfortunately, over the years, it's a natural tendency for movements and things such as this to become more organized, more structured. And that's certainly what has happened to the Church of God. Maybe by necessity, although I'm a little reluctant to say by necessity, maybe it didn't have to be this way, but it has certainly become this way. And I understand the reasons why the early leaders decided that we needed to have a central office. We needed to have, to be more structured and to become very much like a denomination. We could say, well, just for example, we could say that, what happens if let's say in this state, there's 5 churches that don't have pastors. And in this state over here, you have one church that has 5 pastors. And they don't know about each other. Well, if you had a centralized office, they could contact the centralized office and they could get the pastors in the churches. That's organization. And that's a very simple definition of why we become more organized. Of course, on the other hand, if we're organic, who's to say that if we have 5 churches that don't have pastors and they start praying about it, and we have 5 pastors that don't have churches and they start praying about it, that the good Lord is not going to get them together. So there's a couple ways to look at that, okay? One of the problems when a church becomes an organization is that an organization, just like many people, have a lifespan and a life cycle, and it's basically very much like a person. You have birth or start up, you have a growth period, you have maturity, you have decline, and then at that point of decline, you can go 2 ways. You can either rethink what you're doing and regroup, rethink, change maybe if it needs to be done, and revive, or you can continue doing the same thing and you roll into death. And that's the problem with becoming an organization. At the present time, in the state of Missouri, we have 17 churches without pastors. we have 4 or 5 churches that are teetering on closing right now. And I believe that Jim Lyon understands this cycle, and he's trying his best to bring back the Church of God into the movement and out of the organization. If that makes any sense. I hope I can't describe things like Jim does, although he didn't really talk about this. One thing that Jim Lyon has done is he's come up with this slogan, Jesus is the subject. You've seen me put it on different things. I put it on the sign once in a while. Jesus is the subject. That is a very organic thing to do. Why would that be a very organic thing to do? You see, he become leader of the Church of God, and shouldn't he, if he's going to promote the Church of God, wouldn't he say something like, Church of God strong? Wouldn't that be a good slogan? Or, just believing makes you a member. Wouldn't that be a good slogan? If we're going to promote the Church of God. But you see, he understands that if you go back to the original subject, why did the movement start? The movement started because of Jesus Christ. And if the people in the Church of God understand and live their lives that Jesus Christ is the subject, not the church, that the church will flourish. That's an organic thought. One of the things that he done, and I think a very organic movement since he's been in there, is that he's moved the North American Convention from Anderson, Indiana, which is holy ground for the organizational people in the Church of God. We are the Church of God of Anderson, Indiana. He's moved it from Anderson, Indiana, and we've talked about this before, to Oklahoma City. Okay? Now, why would he do that? Well, people today, they don't want to have a camp meeting, which is what they used to call it. They don't want to have an outdoor camp meeting in June anymore. You don't want to meet outside when it's hot. You want to have it in an air-conditioned building. And people don't want to go and camp. They want to stay in hotel rooms. Things have changed. But yet we're still, and yes, they are having it when it was in Anderson, before it left Anderson, they had it in an air-conditioning building. But things were changing. So why not? Why not change? Organizational people would say, let's just stay the course. Let's just stay the course. Let's keep things the same way. Because remember when I talked about that growth cycle? Because they could say, remember, and I don't know how many of these stories I've heard. They would say, well, remember back during the growth cycle. Remember back when everybody came and everybody camped and we had these big camp revivals and it was just great in Anderson, Indiana. Well, things have changed since that growth cycle has happened. And you can't go back. So why not? Why not change the meeting place to somewhere where you can have a air-conditioned auditorium for free, which is what happened in Oklahoma City? Why not go where motels are plentiful instead of scarce? That's organic. That's changing. That's adapting. And the problem is, a lot of times, is that churches, your individual churches, your local church does the same thing. We become organized instead of organic. We think too much about buildings and insurance and things like this instead of Jesus being the subject. Now, how can we tell the difference? A lot of times we can just look at our budget. What do we spend our time, money, effort on? Jim Lyon asked a question. He didn't talk about this too much. You know me, I love talking about the science of church. But he didn't talk about this too much, but he did ask this question. He said, do you have a relationship with your church, or do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Do you have a relationship with your church, or do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? And you don't necessarily answer this question with your mouth. You answer it with your actions. Why do you come to church? Why do you attend the church you're attending? Is it for what that church can do for you and your family? Or do you attend that church as a venue or an avenue that you can serve Jesus Christ? Because after all, Jesus is the subject. That means I'm not the subject. That means that when I come to a church, it's not about me. It's not about my comfort. It's not about my kids. It's about Jesus. and how I can serve Him. And that's number one. If you're around Jim Lyon very long, you know that he lives in Anderson, Indiana, but his heart is in Seattle, Washington. Seattle is his hometown, and he loves Seattle. He loves everything about Washington. And the last church that he pastored was Madison Park Church of God in Anderson, Indiana. And while he was there, a guy approached him and said, why don't we get a bunch of guys together and climb Mount Rainier? He thought he was crazy. He said, I don't know anything about mountain climbing. Of course, Mount Rainier is right there in the area of Seattle, Washington. And he was like, I don't know anything about mountain climbing, but the guy was very persistent. And for various reasons, Mount Rainier wasn't going to happen. But they found out they could climb Mount Adams, which is also in that same area. Now, he basically spoke then about this mountain climb for all 4 sessions or whatever it was. Now, I've got to combine all that he said in those sessions in about, oh my goodness, almost time to go home already. So I got to make it very short. So I'm going to leave out a bunch of it. But it was about his mountain climb. Now, the scripture that he used was Luke 9:28 through 36. Now, it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings that he took Peter, meaning Jesus, took Peter, John, and James, and went up on the mountain to pray. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening. And behold, 2 men talked with him, who were with Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease in Jerusalem. But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep. They were sleeping. And when they were fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Then it happened as they were parting from him that Peter said to Jesus, Master, is it good for us to be here? And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said, while he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. When the voice had ceased, Jesus was found alone. But they kept quiet and told no one of those days, kept quiet and told no one in those days any of the things that they'd seen. Boy, I had trouble with that. Jim said that following Jesus is like climbing a mountain. The first thing that you have to do is commit. Can't climb that mountain unless you absolutely commit to it. There's a lot that goes in, and he went into it into detail, that goes into climbing a mountain, and you've got to commit yourself to this. A lot of training. You have to buy a lot of things. And it's just like following Jesus. You have to commit to Jesus if you're going to follow him. Then as they began to climb, they found there were different levels. Some was easier. Whoops, I already pushed my button, I guess. Some was easier than the other. The lowest level here was the wildflowers. Beautiful. These are actual wildflowers on Mount Adams. And then as they cross the wildflowers, they come upon a glacier that was sliding down the mountain. So then they had to put on their spiked boots, and they had to go across this glacier, and they had to tether themselves together with a rope. There was I think he said 5 or so in his group, that you had to tether yourself together in a rope, because if somebody fell, everybody else was there to catch you, or you were there to catch somebody else. Very scary. He said that when you went to some of these places, you would be afraid that you would fall in. And however, he says that sometimes when it comes to following Jesus, sometimes it's like walking into wildflowers, isn't it? Sometimes it's just a great feeling. But then sometimes it's treacherous. Sometimes it's scary. But however, whenever you go through those treacherous times when you're following Jesus, one thing that always happens is you're never alone. When you've got Jesus with you, you're never alone. He's always there. And seldom does Jesus ever allow us to go through these hard times alone. He places people around us that will help us through if we just reach out to them. And that's number 2. He places people that he tethers, that we could be tethered to. Eventually, they made it to the top. Like I said, I really combined this. They just started, and now they're already at the top. They made it to the top. They had their mountaintop experience. They rejoiced. They made it. They did something that not a lot of people have done, and they had their mountaintop experience. And it never would have happened. The mountaintop experience never would have happened if they hadn't committed themselves to the climb to begin with, if they hadn't tethered themselves together with the other people, and if they hadn't trusted their guide who had been there before them. The guide that knew where it was going. The guide that knew the way. And that's the mountaintop. So, I think that one of the main lessons that we need to understand is that mountains are not hills. Okay? As you can see across there, I believe that's Hood over here. I'm not sure which one's. But that's no little hill. That's a mountain. It took a lot of work. It took days to get to the top of that. And too often I'm afraid that when we talk about our walk with Jesus and what He's brought us through, and we talk about our mountaintop experience, is it really a mountaintop experience, or did He just get us to the top of the hill? What is a mountaintop experience? Sometimes we have to be put in a place where we, as he said, that there's nothing in my control anymore. As he's climbing his mountain, he's climbing these glaciers, and he realized that all he can do is just step in the footprints of the first person in front of him, and he's not in control of anything, and all he's got to do is hold on. Have you ever been there with Jesus? Have you ever been through that experience with Jesus? That's a mountain climb with Jesus. I'm not talking about wildflowers. I'm talking about dangerous. And I could not help but think, as I was sitting there in that sanctuary, or sitting in the dining hall and looking at all these individuals and thinking about all the churches that they represent. And I wonder, how many of us are just walking through the wildflowers? How many of us are just walking through the wildflowers, and how many of us really, do we even have the courage to put on our spike boots? Do we have the courage to put on our spike boots and start up that glacier? You see, we like wildflowers. Wildflowers are appealing. Do we have the courage to commit ourselves to make it to the top? Have you had your mountaintop experience? Have we? I heard a story while I was up there of a pastor. He was a youth pastor, and he decided that the Lord was leading him to be a primary pastor, so he quit his job as youth pastor. He could have had a job at a good church with a great pay package, salary package, but he turned it down because he didn't really feel like this is where the Lord was leading him. And so he's now a maintenance man because he believes that church should be organic. He didn't say that, but really that's what he believes. He's saying, we're doing the same thing in church. We're doing the same thing over and over again. And he said, I'm tired of looking at these statistics that in the past 10 years in the state of Missouri, we have averaged a loss of one church a year in the state of Missouri. And in the state of Missouri, for the last 10 years, we have lost 1,000 worshipers in the Church of God. But yet we continue to do the same things over and over and over again, and we expect different results. So he has started a church that is a completely different concept than the way that we see church. And he is willing to take this job as a maintenance man to be able to see this through. Now, will it work? I don't know. He doesn't know. But that's the part about climbing a mountain, isn't it? You know, when we set off climbing a hill, we got a pretty good idea we're going to make it to the top of the hill. A lot of times, if we're going to climb this hill, we see the top of the hill. We got a pretty good idea we're going to make it. But when we climb a mountain, we don't have any idea. We don't have a clue if we're going to make it or not. And how many of us are really stepping out there and looking for those mountains? We don't like those mountains because they're too hard. We're too busy for those mountains. Another pastor in the state is taking the fight against human trafficking very seriously. We're one of the $1,000 churches, and I praise the Lord for that. But he has taken some of his Sunday night times and taken his congregations, those who will go with him, and circling a motel that is known for prostitution and circling it in prayer. And he's got a plan to meet with the mayor and the chief of police and anybody else that he can meet with that will make a difference in his community. It sounds to me like he's putting on his spike boots. He's getting ready to climb. And guys, you can come on up. I can't help but think, are we just walking in the wildflowers? Are we just walking in? What would describe your life right now as a Christian? If you think if we were going to relate it to climbing a mountain, okay, you've got wildflowers, you got glacier, you got mountaintop. Okay? What would describe your life as a Christian right now? Your walk as a Christian. Is it wildflowers? Is it the glacier? The dangers? Is it the mountaintop? What would describe it? What would describe your church right now? Is it wildflowers? Because you see, we love wildflowers in church. Well, we sell church with wildflowers. We say, come in. We'll make you comfortable. We'll make you happy. We'll provide things for your family. Isn't it nice being in the wildflowers? Because that's what's going to make you want to stay. I did a little lesson on Wednesday night here a while back about what the 7 fastest growing churches in the United States had in common. And one of the things that I think was universal in all 7 churches was whenever you went into the church, that the message and the whole theme was expectation. God is going to do something great here today. God is going to give you something today. God, what is God going to do for you today? People love that. But what have you got? Is that the attitude that we should have? Is that the attitude as Christians? Is I'm a Christian because I'm going to see what God's going to do for me today? Or am I a Christian because I'm ready to climb those mountains? I mean, which is more scriptural? Think about it. I challenge you to get out your New Testament and look at and find, get out the Gospels and find where people have confronted Jesus and basically said, what does it take to follow you? What does it take to follow you? What did Jesus tell them? Did he say, well, it's a piece of cake. It's wildflowers. I'm just going to give you all kinds of things and it's going to be great and you're never going to have any problems. Or did he say, pick up your death sentence and follow me? Pick up your cross. Pick up that thing that you're going to die from, because if you follow me, it's very, very common. It may happen to you. It may very well happen to you. Following me is going to cause your life. You see, I think that when we get so organizational with church, that we start worshiping the church. It's just like Jim Lyons said, do you have a relationship with the church, or do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ? And we start following the church, and we start following the things that the church wants to do, and we start concentrating on the things that makes the church bigger. It's no different whether it's a church or whether it's a for-profit organization. They have the same kind of lifestyle, the same kind of life cycle, because when you begin, if you have a product that you're selling, and when you begin, you're all about that product. You're all about making that product the best you can. You're all about getting that product out there. You're all about that product. But then after you grow a little bit, what happens? You get buildings and you get things and employees and all this. And then you start serving the organization. How many of you had jobs where you've been to seminars with your organization and they're talking about, it's all about profit? It's all about profit, and it's about that. It's about holding this organization together instead of the original thought. And I'm afraid that's where we've gone in church in America. I'm not talking just Church of God, but in church, period. Is that we're so interested in holding the organization together that we forget that Jesus is the subject. What does it mean in your life that Jesus is the subject? Climbing mountains are hard. Climbing mountains are scary. Climbing mountains are costly. But I think Jesus wants us to climb mountains. I think Jesus wants us to go out there and train. Why do we come together, and why do we have Bible school? Or Sunday school? Why do we have Sunday night, Wednesday night? Why do we need to get together and study the Bible? We need to train. We need to train. We need to know what God's Word says. We need to roll these things over. Good luck climbing a mountain if you don't train. We need to be committed. What do we place our greatest commitment on? And I know I get in trouble with this every time. You know what good Christians place their greatest commitment on? What is it? Where do good Christians all over the world, well, especially the United States, I think, place their commitment, their main commitment on? What is it? Their family. It's their family. They'll choose their family first before Jesus Christ. It breaks my heart to say that, but it's true. The church today has fallen apart because Christians are choosing their family before Jesus Christ. It's just like Jim said, if you make Jesus Christ the subject, He'll take care of your family. We still have to concentrate on Jesus Christ. He takes care of everything else. We become too organized. Jesus has got to be first if we're ever going to climb any mountains. So today, I just want to leave you that question. I guess many questions. Where would your life be right now if you looked like you were climbing a mountain? Wildflowers, glacier, or you done something for Jesus that you can stand on top of the mountain and yell it? Where's your church? I can tell you where your church is. It's wherever you are, because we make the church. So anyway, if anything today, I just want you to think and just think about this and what is it in your life? Usually, usually the good Lord's placing something in your life anyway. Is He not? He's working on you on something anyway. And we keep coming up with these excuses why we can't climb the mountain. I could come with a lot of excuses why I couldn't climb the mountain. But I'm not the subject. This church is not the subject. Jesus is the subject. Let's live that way. Come if you will.